What was the most absurd thing you've heard from an overly religious person? A few years ago, I was working with a girl close to my age. She was married and really wanted me to meet her husband, who was a youth pastor at a church. She gave me his number and we made plans to play basketball one Saturday. We played basketball. The church's pastor also joined in. He seemed cool and was just joking around a lot. After the game, he asked if I was going to the service. I told him I wasn't religious and he was relaxed about it, saying he understood if I didn't go but that I was welcome. My friend and her husband convinced me to go to the service on Sunday. I thought church was a formal experience, so I dressed up with a shirt and tie, but when I arrived, it was like a modern, casual church. My friend's husband was wearing flip-flops and board shorts. And as soon as the service started, I knew I had made a mistake. A Christian rock band played on stage, and as the song went on, I saw my friend and her husband with their arms up in the air. The pastor gave his sermon, followed by more songs and closing words. At the end, they asked everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes. The pastor asked if we enjoyed the sermon to raise our hand. What was I supposed to do? Not raise my hand? So I raised my hand and someone put a card in it. The service ended and I looked at the card. It was for my contact information. Then I noticed my friend's husband crying. He said, "I'm so happy that you've decided to become a Christian and let Jesus Christ into your heart." I replied, "I don't think I'm ready for labels or anything." But he was insistent that I was ready and that he and his wife would help me. His wife reached over and squeezed my hand, saying, "There's just so much evidence that Christ exists. So much evidence." I was already uncomfortable, like on a date that had come on way too strong. We were working our way out and they gave me a bag of church stuff and a Bible. We stuck around to talk to the pastor, who I thought was pretty normal up to that point. He pulled me aside and we chatted about NFL games and other things. Then he said, "I noticed you raised your hand at the end of our service today. God told me that today's sermon was going to be special. I think this entire service was just for you, to bring you to our congregation." I never went back. That was the creepiest part by far. I called my family immediately after and was like, "What happened?" Because it felt so predatory. I could see that same tactic being used on someone who was feeling depressed and might believe it. It was bad. I think my friend knew I didn't buy it, and she never made a big deal about me never returning or wanting to socialize with her husband. She was incredibly nice and a great person, but our beliefs were not similar at all. Good times. Looks like you went from doing hoops to getting hooked by the holy hustle. Next time when the pastor asks if you enjoyed the sermon, just give a thumbs up. It's safer than raising your hand. Story 2. My ex-girlfriend worked in the same town I lived in, but lived about 30 minutes away with her aunt and uncle, who were very religious and strict about certain things. Several times after she got off work, there would be a really bad storm, including a few that had produced tornadoes earlier. She would call her aunt and uncle and tell them she wanted to stay the night at my place to wait out the storm, rather than driving through a storm that had already produced tornadoes. They told her that because we weren't married, it would be wrong for her to stay and that she could choose to, but she wouldn't be allowed to live in their home if she did. So she would have to make this 30-minute drive in the middle of a storm. We would talk it over that she could stay with me and my folks, but it always came up. What if something happened and she couldn't stay with us? Where would she go? Keep in mind, she had stayed with us before. Anytime we were going to visit her dad, who lived 8 hours away, she'd stay with us so we could leave early in the morning. That was fine with them. Then after we broke up, which was mutual and we're still friends, and she got her own apartment, she shared something personal about her identity with her aunt and uncle. She told them that she wanted to wait until she had her own place before she told them. They had the nerve to be surprised when she said she was afraid they'd leave her out once they knew, and they had made it very clear they weren't supportive of anything that wasn't 100% in line with their views. These people drive me crazy. Story 3. The most absurd thing I've heard from an overly religious person is the claim that evolution is not real. The Earth is less than 1,000 years old and dinosaurs never existed. They also said that science is fake and that there's no need to worry about becoming seriously ill from the outbreak because God is watching over us. How do they explain the millions who have already passed away? They also believe that being LGBT is a sin and that God didn't intend for it to be that way. If God didn't want it to be that way, why are there people like that? Also, if God were real, why is Earth the only planet with life? Sometimes religious people just make me shake my head. I'm not saying you shouldn't believe in any religion, but if you think logically, the Bible isn't true. People often use their religious beliefs to excuse any horrible action. They then have the nerve to ask that their churches or religious structures not be taxed, but will certainly try to have politicians enact laws that cater to their views. There's a reason for the separation of church and state. If you don't want churches to be taxed, stay in your lane and be quiet. When we were planning home birth and meeting with different midwives, we asked one about her skills and plans in an emergency situation with a baby. She replied that God had a plan and went into some religious talk. My husband and I left immediately. If you pass away on the street because an emergency worker wouldn't treat you because of your identity, and that's against their religious beliefs, clearly that's what God wanted. Someone told me I needed to pray harder. What? I had no idea there were different levels of prayer. Is it like the squeaky wheel? Does God get tired of hearing you nag him so he grants your prayer? During a lesson about evolution, the guy next to me was telling me how evolution wasn't real and that God created everything. I chose to ignore him until he told me that gravity was just a theory. Someone believed that Bill Gates is pulling microchips into immunization, which is the mark of the beast, so he and his group can control our everyday actions and that it will remove all free will. A woman said she was going to perform an exorcism on me because I didn't want to go to their church when they invited me. I'm an atheist and haven't seen any proof of God. When I said I wasn't interested, they started saying that something was inside me and was trying to take my soul or something. Gravity is just a theory? Guess I'll just float to work tomorrow. See you never, stairs. If evolution isn't real, then why do I keep evolving from hungry to hangry? Story 4. A group came to my school to discuss the dangers of driving under the influence. The initial part of the presentation was informative and somber. The speaker shared that his brother had passed away due to an incident involving impaired driving. However, the discussion took a religious turn. The speaker insisted on his beliefs, suggesting that his brother's first mistake was losing faith in God, implying that such a loss of faith could lead to an untimely passing. The speaker also talked about forgiveness, sharing that he had forgiven the driver responsible for his brother's passing. He emphasized the importance of forgiveness, even in difficult situations. Some individuals questioned him about forgiving those who had caused them harm, such as a harmful family member or someone who had violated their trust. The speaker's response, which was that forgiveness was necessary in all cases, was met with a shocked reaction from the school audience. Without the school's consent, the speaker reached out to local religious figures who then approached students to discuss matters of faith. One individual took me aside to talk. They inquired about my beliefs regarding the afterlife. When I expressed uncertainty, they referred to a passage in a small religious text, indicating that belief in a higher power could lead to eternal life, while turning away from such beliefs could be seen as a transgression with severe consequences. They encouraged me to contemplate these ideas. There was also an incident where the speaker and his associates approached a couple at another school who identified as part of a community, and the interaction was not respectful. I attempted to read the speaker's book but stopped after encountering passages that suggested any form of bad thoughts could be seen as a lack of purity, even implying that thinking about intimate matters could be considered a departure from innocence. This experience highlighted a troubling aspect of religious zeal, and even my friends who practiced their faith felt that the speaker's actions were inappropriate. As a result, the speaker and his group were not invited back to the school. Story 5. The most absurd thing I've heard from an overly religious person is the claim that the Christian God is not egotistic, despite the rule to enter heaven being essentially to believe in him and make him more powerful to be happy. I often hear statements like, logic is rebellion against God, or logic is not necessary for me to believe in the Holy Trinity, even though I agree with you that the Bible is an unreliable source for you to base your beliefs on. It's astonishing how people can cling to their beliefs even after being convinced they shouldn't. Our religious education professor once told us a story about an individual who harmed many people but ended up in heaven because they were sorry for their actions while in jail. As a child, I was told not to worry about recycling due to concerns about the ozone layer disappearing because Jesus will return before that happens, followed by laughter. Some believe that God cannot hear your prayers unless you pray in church, and that not attending church means you're destined for hell, as they claim God told them in their dreams. There are those who think dinosaurs or fossils are fake, suggesting they're sculptures made to test faith. I've unearthed fossils myself. They're definitely not sculptures. A belief was shared with me that women who experience a specific health issue in the chest area are those who do not dress modestly, implying that the issue is caused by people looking at their chest and that covering up would prevent the issue. A Mormon roommate once explained that same-gender partnerships are wrong because they don't form a perfect triangle with a child as a third point, using her fingers to demonstrate a triangle. At a park, someone approached me while I was on my phone and demanded I hand it over because it was against God's laws, threatening consequences. I've never seen such a command in the Bible. Some claim Christianity is the one true religion because it's the only one with a blood sacrifice from innocence, as if sacrificing an innocent life to redeem sins is a virtue. Comparing belief in evolution to expecting a car to assemble itself overnight from car parts in your backyard was a moment that shattered my automatic respect for adults. The idea that women should never use birth control, even to prevent health issues, and should instead pray to God for protection against disease is another absurd claim. Saying, my son got better because I prayed for him, without acknowledging the doctor and medicine that actually helped, is a common occurrence. Lastly, a friend wasn't worried about being robbed because he asked Jesus for protection. When he was robbed, he rationalized it by saying the robber must have prayed to God for provision and used him to provide for their needs. Next time someone tells you dinosaurs are just divine sculptures, ask them if God had a hidden talent for paleontological pranks. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 6. An old friend from high school visited a few years ago. We hadn't seen each other since graduation, about 10 years prior. We planned a weekend of girl time. I dropped my then 5-year-old at my aunt's house and we headed to the city. I soon discovered she had embraced religion in the last decade. She wouldn't go clothes shopping because the window displays featured what she considered disrespectful women's clothing. I tried to enjoy our time, but by the end, I was eager to take her to the airport. We picked up my toddler to leave right after dropping my friend off. The kiddo watched an old episode of The Simpsons in my car. My friend reacted strongly, suggesting that letting my child watch cartoons was akin to teaching her negative behaviors. I haven't spoken to that friend since. On another note, my mom's cousin and his wife are extremely religious Christians. They believe that anyone who is ill or dislikes them is possessed by demons. They perform prayers to expel something every morning, fearing they might have been infected during the night, which they view as a time of bad entities. We were unaware of this until they visited us in the US from Germany a decade ago. They told my grandmother, his aunt, that her diabetes was a result of sins. They also contacted my uncle a year later and my cousin was fading away from an illness, suggesting that removing these entities would save him. Reflecting on my teenage years, I recall questioning my faith before deciding that Christianity wasn't for me and leaving the church. A leader in my young women's group complimented my intelligence, but cautioned that asking too many questions could cause the Holy Spirit to stop communicating with me. It felt like she was giving me dating advice. In a different incident, a classmate's mom confronted my two friends and me in our school's parking lot after seeing my friends holding hands. She exclaimed, "You're too young to be questioning your identity. We're losing innocent kids to the influence of these adults. Your parents should be ashamed." She then turned to me and asked if I was the same as them. I said no, and she insisted that I stop associating with my friends because of their identities. One of my friends was on the verge of tears. That's when I told her to leave us alone. I'm still angry about that encounter. It's disheartening that she felt it was okay to approach 3 young girls, berate them for being true to themselves, and tell me to abandon my friends simply because of their identity. The friend who was upset by the confrontation began to doubt herself and felt like she was a bad person because of that woman's words. Story 7. My mom is a priest in the Protestant faith. There was a festival where her church hosted a workshop featuring representatives from various religions to answer people's questions. A man who lived 6 hours away needed a place to stay during the festival, so he stayed in our guest room and had dinner with us each night. He was a Christian and extremely religious, believing every word in the Bible to be true. This led to some awkward conversations. For instance, he was strongly opposed to female priests and even told my mom he hoped she didn't believe in the abyss because that's where she was headed. The moment that shocked me the most was when he shared that his child had passed away a year earlier. He said it had been a tough time, not because he was sad, but because he found it hard to pretend to be sad around others when he was actually happy that his son was in heaven with God. The next day, he suggested to my mom that if she quit her job now, there might still be hope for her to go to heaven. He was trying to save her, but we couldn't handle it anymore. So my mom paid for a hotel for him to stay in. This made him very angry, leading my mom to tell him to pay for his own hotel. Story 8. My grandmother once shared a belief with me that only the earth, the moon, the sun, and possibly 1 or 2 other stars exist, as they're mentioned in the Bible. She believed that the USSR had convinced people of the existence of other planets and celestial bodies through fake telescope images or by projecting images onto the sky during astronomy classes. She claimed this was part of the USSR's agenda. In a separate incident, the mother of a childhood friend who was like a second mother to me ended our friendship because of my Facebook posts about spirituality that were not in line with her religious views. She suggested I read the Bible, which I had already done, and I gently suggested that perhaps she should too. At work, a colleague once explained to me her belief that the Pope was the Antichrist and that all of humanity's moral problems would be solved if the Catholic Church were dissolved and everyone became a Southern Baptist. Her expression was memorable when I revealed that I'm a pagan. Where do you find these people? Story 9. I attended a Christian school from preschool through 8th grade, and the principal there is one of the most unusual individuals I've ever encountered. She didn't embody the positive Christian values one would hope for. Not only was she known for her approach, but she acted as if she had regular conversations with God. I'm not referring to feeling called to do something, that's a different matter. She would behave as if she were having literal discussions with God. She taught my dad at a public middle school, and he insists that she was a completely different person back then. His recollections of her don't match how she describes her life now. Something must have happened to her that drastically changed her, though I'm not sure what it could have been. I haven't even touched on the school's curriculum, which is based in Florida and taught from a highly biased creationist Southern Baptist perspective. I believe they even faced a legal challenge in California over their science teaching methods, but that's a separate issue. You might wonder why my parents chose this school for me, but please don't blame them. They weren't aware of how bad it was at first. They eventually recognized the school's shortcomings, but we all agreed that I would stay until the end because they provided advanced instruction in math and English, which was indeed beneficial for high school. Story 10. It was nearing closing time, and a lady and her husband approached to pay. He placed his items in the counter while she engaged the stock boys in conversation. She kept complimenting his hair. He finally replied, "I guess I just got lucky with the color." This prompted her to say, "How dare you say luck? Luck is derived from an entity. You've insulted Jesus." She then began to pray loudly. The boys were confused, and her husband sighed, gave me an apologetic look, and walked away after paying, leaving his wife crying. As they departed, I made the last closing call and added, "Have a lucky day," knowing they could hear me. In another story, my uncle is the most overly religious person you'll ever meet. He believes that certain objects, animals, movies, TV shows, video games, and even board games are ungodly and should be avoided. He also believes that Halloween is a celebration of a bad entity's birthday, despite my explanations that Halloween originated in Ireland as All Hallows' Eve, a day to scare away spirits in preparation for All Hallows, when the connection between the afterlife and the living world is stronger, allowing loved ones to visit safely, similar to the Mexican holiday. He's stubbornly set in his ways and refuses to consider anyone else's viewpoints. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.